Some love stories don't end with a dramatic goodbye or a clean break. Instead, they quietly change form, stretching across years, shaping lives from a distance, and lingering in ways no one can fully explain. For Don Johnson, there's always been one relationship that stands apart from all the others, not because it lasted forever, but because it never completely disappeared. Even after building a new life, raising a family, and stepping away from the chaos of his early fame, there remained one connection that still carried emotional weight. People close to him have long suggested that this bond never truly broke. And in a rare moment of reflection, Johnson finally admitted that losing one particular woman remained his greatest regret, though the truth behind that confession is far more complicated than a simple lost romance. Long before fame, glamour, and heartbreak entered his life, Johnson's story began in a small, quiet place far removed from Hollywood. He was born in Flat Creek, Missouri, to parents who were barely adults themselves. His mother was a teenager, his father only slightly older, and neither was fully prepared for the responsibility of raising a child. Looking back as an adult, Johnson would describe his childhood as strangely divided. On the surface, it appeared peaceful, even picturesque in that rural American way. But beneath that calm exterior lived tension, instability, and emotional pain that would leave lasting marks on him. His father struggled to make ends meet as a farmer, a constant battle that eventually forced the family to relocate to Wichita, Kansas, in search of a better future. There, his father found steady work at Boeing, slowly climbing the ladder, while his mother worked tirelessly as a beautician to support the household. Johnson would later say that whatever determination he possessed came from watching his parents push forward despite overwhelming odds. They taught him resilience without ever meaning to. Still, financial stability did not erase the emotional struggles inside the home. The family lived in a small government housing unit originally intended for aviation workers. It was cramped, modest, and far from comfortable, especially for a growing family with 4 children. Johnson would later recall that the hardest part of his upbringing was not poverty itself, but the emotional environment. There was distance, confusion, and a lingering sense of abandonment that he didn't fully understand until much later in life. That psychological strain became a quiet force inside him, painful but also motivating. It planted the seeds of creativity and restlessness that would later drive him toward acting. Everything changed when he was 11 years old and his parents divorced. The separation shattered whatever fragile stability remained. Johnson initially stayed with his mother, but he was already rebelling, pushing limits, and searching for control in a world that felt unpredictable. His behavior soon escalated into serious trouble, eventually landing him before a juvenile court judge. The verdict was simple. He needed a new environment. He was sent to live with his father, a decision that would alter the course of his life. Living with his father introduced him to structure for the first time. Their life revolved around the outdoors, hunting, fishing, and working together, and Johnson later described that period as unexpectedly magical. It was the first time he felt grounded, connected, and needed, but it also came with pressure. As the oldest child, he felt responsible for helping support the family, a burden that weighed heavily on someone still in his teens. By 16, the pressure became unbearable. Feeling trapped and hopeless, he walked away from home entirely, determined to survive on his own terms. After finishing high school in 1967, Johnson set his sights on acting, enrolling at the University of Kansas to study theater. It seemed like the first step toward a dream he barely understood but deeply needed. However, college life didn't suit him, and he dropped out after just 1 year. Quitting school didn't mean abandoning his ambition. Instead, he made a bold move west of San Francisco, enrolling in the American Conservatory Theater. The decision brought him closer to Los Angeles and the opportunities he had been chasing. By 1970, he landed his first film role in The Magic Garden of Stanley Sweetheart. For a young actor with nothing but determination behind him, it felt like validation. The film was produced by an Academy Award nominee, which made the opportunity seem even more significant. For a brief moment, Johnson believed he had finally arrived. The years of struggle appeared to be paying off, and the future looked bright. But Hollywood had other plans. The success he imagined did not materialize overnight, and reality soon pulled him back down. He continued working in smaller films, building experience but not momentum. It was during this uncertain period that fate introduced him to the person who would become the most important and complicated figure in his life, Melanie Griffith. Their meeting would ignite a relationship filled with passion, chaos, and emotional intensity that neither of them would ever fully escape. At the time, Johnson was a young actor struggling to break through, while Griffith was a teenage daughter of established star Tippi Hedren. Their connection was immediate, undeniable, and controversial from the start. What began as a chance meeting on a film set quickly evolved into something deeper. Despite their age difference and the concerns it raised, they were drawn to each other in a way that felt almost inevitable. Their relationship would stretch across decades, surviving separations, marriages to other people, personal struggles, and dramatic reunions. It would become a defining love story of Johnson's life. Not because it was stable or easy, but because it was impossible to fully leave behind. As Johnson's career struggled to find direction, his personal life became increasingly turbulent. Yet through every rise and fall, one truth remained constant. No matter how far apart they drifted, he and Melanie Griffith always found their way back into each other's orbit. It was a bond that defied logic, time, and circumstance, the kind of connection that shapes a person long after the relationship itself has changed. And although neither of them could have known it at the time, this complicated love story would influence every chapter of Johnson's life that followed, from his greatest successes to his deepest regrets. By the early 1970s, Don Johnson had finally pushed open the door to Hollywood, but stepping inside proved far more difficult than he imagined. He worked constantly, taking roles wherever he could find them, appearing in films that promised opportunity, but delivered very little recognition. On paper, it looked like progress. In reality, he was stuck in a frustrating cycle, always working, never truly breaking through. The fame he had dreamed about remained just out of reach, and the pressure of uncertainty began to weigh on him. Yet during this period of professional struggle, his personal life took a dramatic turn that would overshadow everything else. While filming The Harad Experiment, Johnson met a young actress who would become the center of his emotional world, Melanie Griffith. She was a daughter of his co-star, legendary actress Tippi Hedren, and their connection sparked almost instantly. Johnson was 22 years old. Griffith was only 14. Even in the anything-goes atmosphere of 1970s Hollywood, the situation raised eyebrows, but neither of them seemed able to ignore the pull between them. Their first meaningful conversation happened in an unlikely place, a quiet stairwell, while the film crew prepared the next scene. What began as casual small talk quickly deepened into something more intense. Griffith would later recall being completely captivated by him, describing him as the most beautiful man she had ever seen. Johnson, too, felt something unusual. He saw in her maturity and sharpness that surprised him, even though he knew the relationship was complicated and risky. Despite his hesitation, the bond grew stronger. Before long, the relationship moved from secret glances to full-blown involvement. Johnson later admitted that picking Griffith up from high school felt surreal, even uncomfortable, yet he continued. When she was expelled from her Catholic school at just 15, reportedly for challenging authority, she moved directly into a home with him. From the outside, it looked like a rebellious love story straight out of a Hollywood script. Behind closed doors, however, it was volatile and emotionally intense. They lived together for several years, caught in a cycle of passion and conflict that neither fully understood. By 1975, the relationship collapsed under its own weight. They separated, but the distance didn't last. About a year later, everything reignited in the most impulsive way possible. Johnson received a late-night call from Griffith while he was out with another woman. The conversation quickly turned emotional, both confessing that they still loved each other. By the next morning, they were on a plane to Las Vegas. Within hours, they were married. It was a decision driven not by stability but by desperation. Two people clinging to something they feared losing forever. The marriage unraveled almost immediately. Griffith later admitted that it was born from emotional turmoil rather than genuine readiness. Johnson himself acknowledged that he had rushed into it without thinking. The relationship had become messy, exhausting, and unsustainable. Their love burned intensely, but lacked the foundation needed to survive. Still, Even as it ended, the connection between them refused to disappear. Amid this personal chaos, Johnson's career finally showed signs of life. In 1975, he starred in the cult film A Boy and His Dog, a role that earned him critical praise and a Saturn Award for Best Actor. For the first time, he felt recognized for his talent rather than just his potential. Acting opposite a telepathic dog required imagination and improvisation, forcing him to stretch creatively in ways he never had before. Critics applauded the performance, calling it bold and convincing, but success brought a new kind of pressure. Johnson was unprepared for the attention, the expectations, and the sudden shift in how people treated him. Instead of grounding him, recognition pushed him further off balance. By the late 1970s, he was turning increasingly to alcohol and drugs as a way to cope. What started as partying soon became dependency. He later described this period as reckless and self-destructive, driven by a need to escape the fear that his success might disappear as quickly as it had arrived. His career stalled again, and his personal life remained unstable. Relationships came and went, none lasting long enough to provide real comfort. He drifted to the late 1970s searching for something: success, stability, meaning, without fully understanding what he needed. Beneath the surface, however, the emotional imprint of his relationship with Griffith remained. No matter how many new people entered his life, none seemed to replace what he had lost. Then, in the early 1980s, a new relationship with actress Patty D'Arbanville forced him to confront himself in a different way. When she became pregnant with his first child, fatherhood changed his perspective. For the first time, he felt responsible for someone else's future. Yet, even that wasn't enough to immediately steady him. His addictions continued to strain the relationship until he finally admitted he needed help. Against all expectations, Johnson entered rehabilitation and managed to get sober. The process, which many assumed would take years, happened surprisingly quickly. Those close to him described it as a turning point, proof that he could change if he truly committed. Still, sobriety did not instantly fix his career. Hollywood had begun to see him as unreliable, a talented actor who had never quite fulfilled his promise. By the early 1980s, he feared his moment had already passed. He continued auditioning, but casting directors no longer viewed him as a leading man. The industry had moved on, and he felt left behind. Yet just as his hope began to fade, an opportunity appeared that would redefine his life entirely. A television role he almost turned down. It would transform him from a struggling actor into a global icon, and finally give him the success he had chased for years. What he didn't realize was that even this breakthrough would not free him from the emotional ties of his past. Because no matter how high his career soared, the story between him and Melanie Griffith was not finished. It was only waiting for the right moment to begin again. By 1984, just when Don Johnson had begun to believe his career might never recover, everything changed almost overnight. He was cast as Detective James Sonny Crockett in the groundbreaking television series Miami Vice, a role that would transform him from a struggling actor into one of the most recognizable faces in the world. Ironically, he nearly missed the opportunity entirely. When his agent first called urging him to fly to Los Angeles for the audition, Johnson was out sailing and didn't want to interrupt his trip. Only after intense persuasion did he agree to go. That reluctant decision saved his career. When Miami Vice premiered, it didn't just succeed, it redefined television. The show's slick visuals, cinematic style, and modern music made it feel unlike anything audiences had seen before. At the center of it all was Johnson, whose portrayal of Crockett embodied cool confidence and quiet intensity. His look became instantly iconic. Light-colored blazers, pastel shirts, loafers without socks, and permanent stubble that suggested a man living on the edge. What seemed like high fashion was actually practical, shaped by the heat of Miami and the demands of the character. Still, millions of viewers tried to copy the style, turning Johnson into a cultural phenomenon. Fame arrived with overwhelming force. Suddenly, he wasn't just an actor. He was a symbol of the 1980s itself. Magazine covers, endorsements, and global recognition followed. Yet beneath the success, the same restlessness that had haunted him for years remained. Johnson understood how fragile fame could be, and that fear pushed him to work obsessively. He trained constantly, monitored his appearance, and became deeply involved in shaping every detail of his character. He was determined not to lose this opportunity the way he had lost others. Off-screen, however, his life remained unpredictable. He acted on impulse, chasing excitement wherever he could find it. At the height of his fame, he even released a music album, proving that his ambitions extended beyond acting. He seemed unstoppable, yet privately he still felt a lingering emptiness, a sense that success alone could not fix what was broken inside. During this period, his romantic life again took dramatic turns. He entered a high-profile relationship with superstar Barbra Streisand, forming one of Hollywood's most talked-about power couples. They were both enormously successful, fiercely independent, and accustomed to being in control. For a time, it appeared they might build something lasting together. Streisand defended him publicly, supported his ambitions, and challenged him intellectually in ways few others had. Yet even this relationship couldn't fully quiet the past, because a connection that had shaped Johnson's life for years suddenly resurfaced. While helping Melanie Griffith through her own struggles with addiction, he found himself pulled back into the emotional orbit they had never truly escaped. Old feelings returned with surprising force. Griffith was facing personal turmoil, her marriage collapsing while her career soared after the success of Working Girl. Their shared history created an understanding no one else could replicate. Once her marriage ended, Johnson and Griffith decided to try again. Not as reckless young lovers, but as two people who believed their bond had survived everything life had thrown at them. Compared to that powerful connection, his relationship with Streisand faded quickly. Within a year, it was over. Johnson later spoke respectfully of her influence on his life, but it was clear that his heart had already chosen a different path. In 1989, Johnson and Griffith married again in a small, intimate ceremony that felt hopeful rather than impulsive. This time, they believed things would be different. They were older, sober, and more self-aware. Instead of chasing Hollywood parties, they focused on building a family. They split their time between Miami and a ranch in Aspen, eventually settling into a quieter life away from constant media attention. That same year brought even bigger news. They were expecting a child together. On October 4th, 1989, their daughter Dakota Johnson was born. Her arrival felt like a reward for everything they had endured, proof that they had finally moved beyond the chaos of their past. Fatherhood grounded Johnson in a way fame never could. For the first time, he spoke openly about feeling clear-minded and present. Griffith, according to those close to her, was happier than she had ever been. She had the family she had dreamed of since she was young. Yet even during this period of stability, cracks began forming beneath the surface. After years of living as Sonny Crockett, Johnson felt creatively exhausted. Leaving Miami Vice in 1989 was necessary, but it also left him searching for identity beyond the role that had defined him. Without the structure of the show, his old habits and insecurities began creeping back in. He spent lavishly on boats, luxury homes, cars, and even a private jet, trying to fill an emotional void he couldn't fully explain. From the outside, it looked like the life of someone who had everything. Inside, he felt increasingly lost. Sobriety proved to be a fragile achievement, and he struggled privately with relapses that reminded him how difficult real change could be. Still, he remained committed to his work and his family. He and Griffith even starred together in films, enjoying the rare experience of sharing both professional and personal lives. For a while, it seemed they had finally found balance. But as time passed, they began evolving in different directions. The passion that once reunited them again and again slowly faded, replaced by tension neither could ignore. By the mid-1990s, the strain became impossible to hide. Both faced personal struggles, relapses, and rumors that fueled media speculation. Eventually, the marriage ended once more, this time for good. Their romantic story, which had stretched across decades, finally reached its conclusion. Yet even in separation, their connection did not disappear. They remained linked through their daughter and the shared history that had shaped them both. Johnson would later rebuild his life with a quieter focus on family, marrying teacher Kelly Flager in 1999 and stepping away from the excess that once defined him. With her, he found the stability he had been searching for since childhood. But no matter how peaceful his life became, one truth lingered quietly in the background. Some relationships never truly end. They simply change form, becoming part of who you are. And as the years passed, Johnson would come to realize that the love story he once thought was behind him still held a place in his heart. Not as regret alone, but as a reminder of everything that shaped the man he became. As the years passed, Don Johnson gradually stepped away from the chaos that had once defined his life. The reckless energy of his youth gave way to something quieter, more reflective. His 1999 marriage to Kelly Flager marked a turning point. Not just another relationship, but a complete reset. Unlike the Hollywood romances that had dominated his past, this one was grounded in normalcy. Flager was a schoolteacher, far removed from fame and celebrity culture, and that distance from the spotlight was exactly what Johnson needed. With her, he built a stable home, raised 3 children, and embraced a version of himself that prioritized family over attention. Friends noticed the transformation immediately. The wild spending slowed, the parties disappeared, and the man once known for impulsive decisions became focused and present. Johnson later described this shift as spiritual, the result of years spent confronting his mistakes and searching for something meaningful beneath the noise of fame. Being a father became his most important role. Reconnecting with his older children, including Dakota Johnson, grounded him even further. Watching Dakota carve out her own successful career filled him with pride, not because of her celebrity status, but because she seemed genuinely fulfilled and independent. Despite the stability he found, one chapter of his life never fully closed: his long, complicated history with Melanie Griffith. Over time, their relationship evolved into something quieter, but no less significant. They were no longer the passionate young lovers who kept finding their way back to each other, nor the married couple trying to hold a family together under pressure. Instead, they became something rarer. 2 people bound by shared history, mutual respect, and a love that had changed form without disappearing. Reports in recent years have suggested that Johnson and Griffith have grown close again, though not romantically. Their connection now revolves around family, especially their daughter Dakota, whose success has naturally brought them back into the same orbit. Family gatherings, holidays, and milestones have given them opportunities to spend time together without the expectations that once complicated everything. Those close to them say the atmosphere is calm, even warm, a sign that time has softened the wounds of the past. Johnson has also remained close to Griffith's mother, Tippi Hedren, reinforcing the idea that their bond extends beyond romance. They are still, in many ways, family. For Johnson, the instinct to protect and care for Griffith never faded, even after their divorce. When she faced serious health challenges, including surgery for skin cancer and her long struggle with epilepsy, he reportedly offered steady support. It wasn't about rekindling the past, but about honoring the connection they would always share. Griffith's health journey was difficult, marked by frightening episodes that went undiagnosed for years. She eventually revealed that stress-related seizures had affected her for decades before doctors identified epilepsy as the cause. Through surgeries, treatments, and recovery, she rebuilt her life on her own terms. Sources say Johnson remained quietly in her corner throughout it all, ready to help however he could. If she ever chose to date again, he would even support that, wanting nothing more than her happiness. What makes their story remarkable is not that they found their way back to romance, but that they found peace. After decades of passion, chaos, addiction, reconciliation, and heartbreak, they reached a place where none of those things controlled them anymore. The intensity that once defined their relationship settled into something steady and enduring. They became friends, allies, and co-parents who understood each other better than anyone else ever could. In reflecting on his life, Johnson has acknowledged that Griffith was a great love who shaped him, the one who stayed with him through every transformation. Losing the romantic version of that relationship remains a regret, but it is not a bitter one. Instead, it carries a sense of acceptance. Some love stories are not meant to last in the way we expect. They are meant to change us, guide us, and remain part of us long after the circumstances have shifted. Today, Johnson's life is defined less by the roles he played on screen and more by the relationships he preserved off-screen. He finally found a peace he spent decades chasing, not through fame or success, but through family and self-understanding. And while he built a new future with Flager, the past never disappeared entirely. It simply became a quiet presence, a reminder of who he once was and how far he had come. In the end, the woman he regrets losing is not truly lost at all. She remains part of the story, woven into the fabric of his life through shared memories, their daughter, and a bond that time could not erase. Their journey proves that love does not always end. Sometimes it transforms into something deeper, something that no longer needs passion to survive. For Don Johnson, that realization may be the most meaningful victory of all. After a lifetime of searching, falling, rising, and reinventing himself, he finally understands that home is not a place or career milestone. It is a people who remain when everything else changes, the ones who knew you before the world did, and stayed connected even when the story seemed over. And in that sense, the love he thought he lost never truly left. It simply became part of who he is.